It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 25, looking at the players of Euro 2024. This episode is looking at the players of Portugal. Here we go. Hello and welcome again to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin and we continue Series 25 on the groups and players of the 2024 Euro Cup. This episode covers Portugal players and it is actually part 2 of the player mediacast. And in this one, we look at the selections. In part 1, we made a list of the candidates and introduced them and their likelihood of making the squad. And there is a link to that part 1 in the show notes. Part 2 here will be divided into 2 sections. In section 1, we look over the list we compiled in part 1 to see who made it and who didn't. And then in section 2, we summarize the surprises in the selections and review injuries. Let's begin then. We'll begin by taking a look actually at their preliminary squad for Portugal, and that was a 26-man final roster published on May 21st. So a couple of teams did that. I'm thinking Belgium and Ukraine putting out a final squad quite early. However, in the case of Portugal, unlike Belgium and Ukraine, they made some changes to the document. So one player was cut due to injury and one player added. Otherwise, no preliminary squad for Portugal, and we'll talk about that change as we go along. The other thing to talk about is that Portugal played warm-up games. Most teams played 2. I think only Ukraine and Portugal played 3 warm-up games there in early June. And we've looked at those lineups, and in other media casts for other teams, we've kind of used those as perhaps shedding light on who the starters are going to be. We feel that for Portugal, it really doesn't shed that much light. It would just be complicated talking about 3 different games and the variety of players they used. So we're going to forego that with Portugal again, because we don't think it really indicates who the starters are going to be. Okay, let's move on to section 1. And we have the manager first. Roberto Martinez, having just come off managing the World Cup with Belgium in 2022, became manager of Portugal and will manage them through this tournament. So we'll regard him as a successful selection. Let's go on to the goalkeepers, where we had 2 definite candidates, Rio Patricio, who was selected, and Jose Sar, also selected. Actually, what we find is that teams that put out a 26-man kind of a final roster and put it out fairly early generally go with the players we expect them to go with. I think we're going to find that with Portugal here. The third goalkeeper was likely candidate Diogo Costa, and he was selected. We did have a possible but unlikely candidate in Samuel Suarez, but he was not selected. In defense, we have the central defenders, one possible candidate in Ruben Diaz, and he was selected. Did I say possible? Definite candidate there. We had 3 players at the likely level, Danilo Pereira, Antonio Silva, and Goncalo Ignacio, all 3 of them selected for the final squad. And we had 3 possible candidates as well. Usually it's 5 or 6 candidates making it. So we didn't expect all of these to be selected, but the first one, Pepe, was selected. So the 41-year-old making it to the final squad. Holy smokes. And then the other 2, Totti Gomez and Diogo Lete, not selected for the final squad. Over to the left back position, we have Rafael Guerreiro, and he was an injury doubt, and apparently that injury prevents him from being selected. He was or just a possible candidate. So we're not actually dead sure that the injury was the reason. We'll probably come back to him in section 2. But the other possible candidate, Nuno Mendes, was selected there. In the right back position, we have definite candidate João Cancelo, and he was selected. And also Diego Dallo, the likely candidate there, also selected. And two possible candidates were Nelson Semedo and João Mario. Nelson Semedo was selected there. So 3 right backs and 1 left back. And I did notice that João Cancelo did start the 3rd warm-up game on the right side, playing as a right winger in a 3-man defence there. So we might have João Cancelo covering over on the left side there. Okay, defensive midfielders is what we move on to. And actually, no, we had a special category for Bruno Fernandes, a versatile midfielder, because he played so many different positions over the last year and a half. So Bruno Fernandes was selected for the squad, no surprise there. And on to the defensive midfielders, where we had 3 likely candidates. Ruben Neves was the first, João Paulinho the second, and João Neves the third. All 3 of those likely candidates selected for the final squad. All right, so we move to central midfielders. Here we had no definite candidates either, probably because of the variety of players that Portugal used. None of them started enough for us to consider them definite. But likely candidate Vitinha was selected for the final squad. But possible candidate Matheus Nunes was not initially selected, but he is the player who was brought in to replace, okay, I'll reveal it, it was Otavio, who we'll meet a bit later, got injured, and Matheus Nunes was called up to replace him. So we'll put him in yellow to indicate that he's a replacement, not initially selected for the final squad. Okay, central midfield is complete, and so we move on to, left midfielders. Here is where we had Otavio. Though he is quoted as a right midfielder, we had him over on the left here because that's where he predominantly played. And we'll talk about his injury a little bit later, but he had been a likely candidate for us here, and but withdrew from the squad. Okay, we had no candidates for right midfielders though, so we move up to attacking midfielders, and here we had actually coded as a secondary striker, but we moved João Felix here because he had been starting in this position since the start of 2023 at least. And we also have another definite candidate in Rafael Leão. Both of those selected, João Felix and Rafael Leão. We have a likely candidate too in Diogo Jota, who was selected also. And then we had 4 possible candidates. They were Bruma, Ricardo Horta, Pedro Neto, and Jota Silva. And among them, only one of them made it. I'll give you a moment to guess. Okay, time's up. It's Pedro Neto was the one who was selected. So 4 left attacking players. So wouldn't be surprised to see them in other positions as well. On the right attacking side, we have a definite candidate in Bernardo Silva, and we had a possible candidate in Francisco Conceição, and he was selected, Francisco Conceição. However, our possible but unlikely Francisco Trincão was not selected. Central attacking midfielders, we don't have many candidates here. They don't actually use the position that much. We only had Fabio Carvalho as a possible but unlikely candidate. um, uh, the only viable candidate over here, and he did not make the selection. Over to forwards. Well, we did have João Felix as a secondary striker, but we moved into the left attack. So we're just left with the category of forwards, and we have Cristiano Ronaldo, the captain, as a definite candidate, and he made it. So 39 years old, and is not the oldest player on the team. And as a likely candidate, we have Goncalo Ramos, who was selected for the squad, but our possible candidate, Danny Mota, not selected. There we have it then, the 26 players, 27 candidates. Otavio was injured and Nunes came in to replace him. And we have that covered there. So we move on to section 2 and a review of the surprises. So as I said, when they name a preliminary squad early on, there aren't many surprises, and there are not for Portugal. No notable non-selections, so no players that we had in the likely or definite section were left out, and no surprise inclusions. And also no new players added to the squad. So going with the stable squad they have, and not adding to it. Let's look at injuries. We don't have any players recovering. Well, we don't have any significant players in this, apart from the last category, players who were injured but were not strong candidates anyway. And here we have Rafael Guerreiro. He was out with an ankle injury since early May and was an unknown return date. Not selected for the squad. Now, the injury might have played a role in that because he had been selected for every tournament since Euro 2016. That includes the 2017 Confederations Cup. But anyway, we only had him as a possible candidate based on his participation. So we're not really sure if the decision was basically due to the injury or due to his participation. Okay, I thought we had one more candidate that we needed to talk about. Yes, we do. We have Otavio situation. So he was dropped due to injury, and he was out with a muscle tear. Well, that was so recent, there's an unknown return date. Anyway, he's out for the Cup, Otavio. He had played the last game of the season with his club on May 27th, but in that game he was subbed out at halftime. So we're presuming that he picked up the injury there because he came injured to the first warm-up game. So he already had the injury at the time of the first warm-up game. So Otavio dropped there, and as we saw, replaced by Matthias Nunes, who had been a possible candidate. All right, that brings us to the end of our look at Portugal. We would like to thank Mike Tripak, Make Sound Music, and Pixabay for the wonderful background music called Dance 90s accompanying this mediacast.